raw, unfiltered opening of Jenny Knits with Stainless Steel Cable. I mean, Artificially Independently Intelligent, our new show that we're going to have here on LinkedIn. Hopefully it's live. If you
Yep.
guys are here, then it's live. If you're not, then it didn't go live. Either
And
way,
you're listening to it somewhere recorded.
right. Yeah. And we're also recording this. We're going to stream it over to YouTube. So you might be watching it over there. So anyway, just for a quick way of intro, my name is Bill Tarr. I'm a SaaS evangelist. I work for the AWS SaaS Factory. And I have Andy with me. Andy, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Andy Powell. I'm part of the SaaS Factory team as well, working on transformation of our partners into SaaS and Gen AI businesses.
Nice. Yeah. And just to give you some context to the show, Andy and I always meet and we have these great conversations about the stuff we're thinking about. And we just decided, why don't we just go live and talk about these in public? So we're going to spill all over Andy's dirty secrets and talk about, no, we're just going to talk about the cool stuff we talk about. And it's all technology, right? I mean, obviously artificial intelligence is on everybody's minds, but just anything general about technology. Feel free to hop into the comment section and give us a chat, ask any questions you want, no matter how crazy you think they may be. We're just here to talk. So with that, Andy, and by the way, a little context, we didn't tell each other what we want to talk about. We're just going to show up and we're going to bring our own topics and talk about them and have a good time. So Andy, what's the first thing you want to talk about today, man?
So I've been purposely avoiding talking to you during the week so that I didn't blow any of these topics.
Nice.
So it's, I think, it's been an interesting week because I've met with a number of customers who are on this journey or just kind of starting to transform their business. And it's really, there's some common themes running through. And, it's some questions are like, will this transform my business? Can this transform my business? And I think that it is, the answer is it depends. You're not going to completely transform a bank. A bank is going to be a bank. It's still going to, process transactions and have all sorts of financial products and whatnot. But the way you interact with banks is changing. I use the example of, my kids. They have never in their life set foot inside a bank. All they know is, the app on their phone, and that's how they interact with a bank.
Yeah.
And that completely is different than how our generation, has interacted with the bank or even our parents. And so, the whole paradigm is changing. And the next evolution of that, comes in the form of agents.
I think it's interesting that you say that. I had an interesting conversation earlier today. And one of the things that came up was, what do agents look like in the web browser? And off the top of my head, the first thing that popped in my head is, why do we need a web browser? I feel like that all of the paradigms that we think about for technology might be about to shift.
Well,
right?
I think that the chatbot is like, there's an overwhelming mindset that if we just put a chatbot on the website, that's powered by Gen AI, we're good. And that's completely missing the point.
Yeah. I agree. I think chatbot's already like a tired modality. I think it's a necessary one. Like humans have to find some way to communicate with agents and with systems. I was watching a cool demos the other day where somebody was just talking to a chatbot. I thought that was a nice leap forward. And obviously, I mean, we can do it. Any of us can talk to our phone and it has good enough voice recognition. It picks everything up. But I think there's got to be some shifts here in this. And I think chatbots are fine. Like they do what they do. We're going to need pieces of them, but it misses the point. It's like looking at the outer layer of an eggshell of an egg and like thinking you know what an egg is. Like everything underneath is what you care about. The shell is really the least important thing of what you're looking at.
But
yeah, I like your observations.
I think the nuance of what all it can do and what all it can provide and how it actually literally will transform a business is the greater impact. And that's, that's that next level that folks aren't diving into. And, the more we start to do that, I think the less fear there is around it. You get less of the, this is going to take my job. And I have, a ton of thoughts on that, but it's, it is, starting to figure out, how can you integrate it into your product, and how does it enhance your product beyond, just the surface.
Yeah, I mean, why not just jump into the is AI going to take our jobs conversation? Because nobody's
Yeah.
talking about that.
So I get where that's coming from, and that's a completely valid
Yeah.
fear. I think we need to recognize a couple things. One, right now we're at a point where, especially like with these code generators, it's only able to, generate what it knows, what it's been trained on. It
Right.
doesn't innovate. It doesn't, create new
Right.
design patterns. It doesn't create, new ways of doing things. That's still on the human element. So, there's still a need for that. Now, the other side of that coin is that the lower level developers will be replaced by the bots, which will end up getting us to a point where we don't have folks that are senior enough to, to challenge these complex problems. So it's almost like we're kind of, getting a little too excited about it, but I liken the whole, the whole fear of it to, a friend of mine gave me a great example earlier this week. When Photoshop came out, print designers initially were like, oh, it's going to take our jobs. It's going to, completely eliminate what we do. And it didn't. And what it did is it changed how you work, changed how they designed, how they published. And that's the really important thing here. Gen AI is not going to change what you do. You're still going to have value in some way there. It's going to change how you do it. And I think that's the thing that people are getting lost on.
I was thinking about that when we talked not that long ago, and it reminded me a little bit about the shift in DevOps, right? Like the whole shift left of responsibilities. Like, oh, we can have DevOps, but we can shift some of those responsibilities over to a developer. And your natural conclusion is like, oh, well, why do you need DevOps? I know just as many DevOps engineers now as I knew then. It did not change the life of the DevOps engineer. Well, maybe it did, but they still had a job. There's still plenty for them to do. They're still trying to unwind the whole ball of messes that we make for them and trying to get everything live. It just shifted some of those responsibilities. And now developers could do things unfettered by waiting for DevOps engineers, and the DevOps engineers can go to work on the next level stuff. So I think it at least rings, I don't know if this is a shift left moment, but it feels a little bit similar.
Yeah, and we're still in this, mega hype cycle, where it is, the sky's the limit. And it moves like a pendulum. It's swinging all the way over here. And at some point, it's going to kind of correct itself back towards the middle. It's just the way this works. And we saw it, 10 years ago almost now with blockchain. Blockchain was going to, completely revolutionize, how we did everything. And, it didn't. But it's still, it had the hype and it kind of swung back. And so I think we're going to see the same type of thing.
Yeah. I've always wondered about that hype cycle because everyone remembers the trough of disillusionment. Like that's the only part of the hype cycle that I remember. I can't tell you like what's the peak called? What's like super excitement?
Yeah, I don't
hyper
remember.
Excitement. What is that called at the peak? I don't either. Like I just remember the trough of disillusionment. Like that feels like the most poignant part about that whole thing is like things swing up and then they swing back down and then you've got to build them back up slowly. And it feels like we're still on that upswing, that initial upswing. Everyone's super excited. People are throwing money at it. VCs just, we won't touch anything unless it's agentic AI, which is, hey, I mean, that's why it's a hype cycle because everyone needs to like climb into it to find out what it can do. There'll be some huge winners and you want to be betting on those winners. And then a lot of the other stuff is going to fall off and they're going to have to figure out the practical side.
And I think the interesting thing about this is, let's just keep using the blockchain example. That started from, the tech side out. And the adoption of this has really started from the consumer side and then come into the business side. And I think, once you start establishing the foothold in the consumer market, it almost becomes ubiquitous into the enterprise. And we saw that like when we were building mobile applications when Tinder came out, the swipe interaction. They created a
Yeah.
completely new interaction, and I saw it pop up in enterprise applications all over the place. So maybe it's a theory maybe we need to test, but I think if it gains that traction initially in the consumer side, then it's something that's probably going to be a little more lasting than something that starts on the tech side.
It's a good observation. I think everyone remembers the sort of aha moment with with ChatGPT, because all of that technology already existed. It was nothing particularly new about ChatGPT. Behind the scenes, LLMs had already emerged, and you probably could already go through the back end and do what ChatGPT was doing. It was only when you exposed it to the broader user community and people are like, "Oh, look what I can do." I don't think anyone had really thought about the commercial value of it until people told them, like, no, like that's exactly what we want. We want to come in and be able to ask ourselves, we unfiltered, and get responses from these large language models that seem intelligent, right? That are trained on a vast amount of data and can give us more direction than you can get just by going and searching on Google, right? I mean, that was a huge moment.
And I
for
wonder,
everybody.
we're more aware of it being, on the tech side of it, of aware of hallucinations. I wonder how aware folks are in general on the consumer side, and do they start taking hallucinations as fact? That could be scary.
I worry a lot about that. I mean, I feel like that will work itself out. Like, this is probably, again, part of that trough of disillusionment. Like, if you got enough hallucinations from interactions with ChatGPT or any other LLM, you might get disillusioned about using it, but it's also continually improving, right? Like, and I feel like, pitting models against each other, having models that confirm other models aren't going off the rails, eventually will have built up enough guardrails around LLMs that the hallucinations will become background noise, right? Like, it will be noticeable when it happens, like, ooh, how did the guardrails not get that? Right? And they'll get better and better. But I think that's the problem with the one part of things, the accuracy and the believability of it still has people sort of, I can't trust that for what I want to do right now. But at the same time, I see companies making big bets that they'll be able to use this stuff for pretty sensitive topics, right? For doing actual business, like you're talking about with banking. There are banks out there saying, yeah, I think we could move transactions around with AI, and we maybe not today, maybe we can't trust it right now, but we're gonna. And we don't want to.
Maybe a lender, has some sort of model where they can take, all sorts of data and not just credit score, and make a lending decision based on a bunch of factors beyond just that. I mean, it's I think there's some interesting pieces that can be done. There are some sectors I think that are really going to be transformed by this. I'm really interested to see what happens in the healthcare sector. Especially with imaging and diagnostics. I think there's some real potential there. There's still going to need to be human validation, but that's got some potential. And education is another area where I think this could, what does education look like in the light of this new Gen AI world we live in?
Yeah, it's interesting that you said healthcare. One of the things our coworker Koyel often says when she's talking about AI is it's her thinking partner. Not like that she's relying on it to think for her, but she uses it. She bounces ideas off of it. She goes, if she has a concept, gathers some data. I feel like the healthcare profession has the most to gain by that. As somebody who has a terrible memory and would have never made a good doctor, I'm always a little amazed when you go in to talk to a doctor and they're like, "Oh, yeah, you have this condition, this, and you must have that." And they're like, "Oh, wow, you must have so much book data in your head." But really, their skill, if you will, is not the memorization. They could have picked up a book and looked it up, or looked it up on the internet. It's their ability to diagnose, to take those facts and combine them and be like, "Yes, I saw these things. All of these things make me think this." LLMs and just Gen AI, as it improves, is going to be able to make them better, right? Here's more suggestions. You do the diagnosis.
So do you remember that show a few years back, House? Okay, it was like a take on Sherlock Holmes. And imagine, because it was all about this what they call it diagnostic medicine. It was some silly thing they made up for TV, but it was like finding these rare and different diseases. Now imagine if you replace that person that's able to figure all that stuff out with an LLM that can take all the test results in and figure it out. So I mean that's there's a business right there. I mean that could be really interesting.
I mean, potentially a kind of cool business, right? Like that idea. I think, I mean, I've had good conversations with people who have cool ideas, who are sort of domain experts in something. That there's so many areas where we still rely on domain experts, and that idea of a domain expert. I don't care how smart you are. You could be Einstein. Eventually, if all you're doing is basing things off existing knowledge, then Gen AI will be smarter than you in that sense, in the sense of being able to just simply digest all of the information in the world and regurgitate stuff. Where you differentiate yourself as Einstein is you come up with new thought leadership.
Yeah, I think
so. Right.
My guess is one of the first places we'll see this kind of like domain expertise come through is something like TurboTax. Your AI accountant.
Okay. All right,
Yeah.
Intuit, are you out there?
I'm sure they're probably on it, but I mean, it makes sense. I mean,
bet.
You think about these areas that require years upon years of education and specialization. I mean, it's just that vast amount of knowledge that is ripe for this.
Yeah, I kind of think you're edging in an interesting direction there, because I thought lawyers was sort of my guess. Like, it's just, there's so much knowledge. I mean, just recently someone mentioned that the Supreme Court had made a decision based on British common law from like 1680 or whatever. I don't know how any human being could possibly remember the entire history of law from Great Britain through today, and be able to, given a set of criteria, come up with all of the relevant cases. And I don't think they do, to be honest. I think if you go into court, you're hoping that your lawyer found the right example that's going to resonate with the judge. They didn't have time to look at every
or persuasive enough.
They just didn't. Or well, and again, like that's what you're paying them for, really. Like the diagnosis of that doctor, you're paying them for their presence, for their ability to influence other people. If they have all of the data at hand, then they can just unlock that. I'm not gonna be sitting here like looking at my yellow notepad trying to remember like that court case I was looking up 3 days ago. It's all been laid out for me cleanly, and I can just grab those references and work on just influencing the people in the jury, influencing the judge, making my case. And it just again, like you were saying, the concern about losing jobs is probably relevant, but for the most part, I still see it unlocking us doing creative activities, going up to the next level of things. As long as that's true, I mean, at some point, maybe that isn't. At some point, maybe it gets creative and smart, and then we're like, then we're like a sci-fi movie, all sitting around like, well,
we all become batteries in the Matrix.
I mean, that's not the sci-fi movie I was hoping for, but it seems realistic. I mean, like what's the movie with the cute robots? Remember the Disney movie where they all go into outer space?
Yeah, WALL-E.
WALL-E.
Yeah, we're all gonna have our floating chairs.
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping for that. We're just have our floating chairs. We're just watching movies and drinking like soft drink and getting fat. I mean, I don't know that that's the future I'm hoping for, but it sounds better than the Matrix.
Okay, so sorry, you just my brain just went down a rabbit hole. So what if you have, some sort of AI system that can do chemical analysis and can reverse engineer the secret formula for Coca-Cola?
Ooh,
so that it's not patented. I mean, it's a trade secret,
right?
But if a system can, figure it out, then do trade secrets like that are they still protected? That's more of a legal question, but it's one of those things. I mean, yeah, it's worth asking, I think.
I mean, it does. The whole concept of intellectual property in general kind of gets interesting. So if I take if I write a song, sorry, I'm a musician sometimes, pretend to be anyway. If I write a song and I happen to be thinking of a Bob Dylan song while I'm writing it, and I end out stealing one of his licks,
Yeah.
I can get sued, right? Bob Dylan can be like,
it's like,
in the Blowfish,
yeah, or
right?
the Verve
They
did
actually got
to
sued.
Rolling Stones.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it, and legitimately they're in their rights. Like, you listened to what I did and you copied something of mine. If an LLM processes everything and comes up with something, how do we even know whether it copied it or whether it simply like listened to everything in the world and reinvented the wheel and said, yeah, I came up with the exact same, chord and order and series of notes because like that's the perfect combination of things in a 4/4 tempo of 67, and it came up with the exact same formula, but it's independent of yours. Like, how do you now prove that
I think it comes down to the training data. What was it trained on? If it was trained on that material, then I think it's absolutely you have a case. But
if it was trained on all of the music in the world, like, it's a little extreme, but like if it was and it happened to come up with that same lick.
Yeah, but still, I mean, if it's already been out there and copyrighted, this is probably area for lawyers, but it seems like if it's already been created, then it's that's where you start getting sticky.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I was just kind of thinking, like, geez, like all of the things in the world are kind of like this. What is the saying? Like, you put 100 monkeys in front of typewriters for 100 years, and eventually they're going to write Shakespeare.
Yeah, will they?
I mean, will they really though?
I mean, you might end up with Dude, Where's My Car? But, I mean, not going to be Shakespeare.
Exactly, and I mean, that's almost Shakespeare anyway. I mean, that's a timeless classic right there. So,
sure.
Yeah, I want to switch gears a little bit. Something else I was thinking about this morning, as I was talking to a group of other SAs, is who are going to be the winners. Like, so the example I'll give, like from the business school area of the world, Levi Strauss, right? Everyone knows Levi Strauss. We all know Levi's, blue jeans, still in every mall in America. Still making a pretty good product. Everybody's, everyone likes Levi's. I've never met anybody who's down on that. But he got started in San Francisco during the gold rush, right? And he and others, I'm sure, mostly got wealthy and famous because during the gold rush, instead of like grabbing a pickaxe and going to try to dig at the ground and get some gold out of the ground, they started selling pickaxes, right? They were the ones being like, yeah, that's awesome. You guys go dig, but we're going to charge you $74 for a pickaxe because we're the only pickaxe in town and you're going to need it. Made lots of money. Porsche found, invented blue jeans, became successful. So long story long, what I'm wondering is, lots of people can make agents now. Lots of people can build tools. Lots of people can build different pieces of this. But at some point, there's somebody who makes the pickaxe here who's going to do really well. Like, there is the aggregator or the platform or whatever that looks like that's going to be the winner of the day, even though maybe they aren't the ones creating agents, maybe they're not the ones doing the innovation. They're the ones who will be the big winner. Like, if you had to like just cast your mind 10 years down the road and we're looking back, what's like the obvious Levi Strauss that we're probably missing right now? But if you think about it, it's like, wow, they're really well placed to succeed with this new world we're in.
If they even exist right now. Even if they exist right now. I mean, it could be two guys in a garage somewhere.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's never happened before.
My first reaction is it's going to be one of the cloud providers. Because we're all placed in the optimum place to do that. I guess the question becomes, what is the pickaxe? Is the pickaxe the silicon? Is it how high of a level, does a pickaxe occur? There's a lot of nuance to that.
Yeah, and I think you could answer it any way you wanted to. Like, I think it could be a cloud provider, and again, early on the silicon, right? Like early on GPUs and their scarcity, like the silicon providers, probably, again, they're providing fixed access to the cloud providers. So, AMD and Intel and all these guys are killing it, making lots of money. But that's the early phase, right? I don't know that that's, when I think about 10 years from now, I feel like the LLM thing is going to stabilize, right? We made a lot of GPUs. We're going to make more. The number of people who have to continue to make LLMs probably falls off a little, maybe. I mean, again, guesswork. We're going to get enough of this baseline. There'll still be lots of people training, lots of people doing like smaller specific tasks, maybe small language models, maybe doing knowledge bases or other things on top of these things. But I think where I was thinking about this is interesting. I thought of it about like a slightly different direction. I was thinking about how agents are attracted to data. Okay. So like the individual agents, and this will get a little long-winded, so get ready. But there are certainly, like, there's this attraction of agents to data. So that's one piece of this. The second piece is there's going to be such a sort of flood of agents and software that is run by agents that individually we're going to get kind of overwhelmed. Like think pre-SaaS, when you had to install all of your own software, everything came like a packet. Like you had people that just ran around crazily all day installing stuff and then fixing installations, upgrading installations. Agents right now are kind of in that world where I don't want to have 500 agents from all of my people to do their jobs, where I have to go to, whether it's a VM or an EC2 or whatever that construct is for infrastructure, that I have to go install stuff and keep it up to date. Instead, like I kind of like that the agents to be plugged into some platform that I already have that has access to my data. So like I've been my mind has been drifting in this direction. And again, like my opinion and $5 to buy a candy bar these days. There really is, though, an interesting point here with this data and the platforms and the ability to inject agents into them. And I keep thinking about some of the large providers that already sit in customer accounts, like Databricks, like Confluent, like these other large data platforms that are dealing with lots of data. And I wonder if there's a play there. I wonder if there's a play where they like you bring your agent stuff and we'll figure it out for
the other direction and come at it from the consumer's point of view. They're already there. The super agents.
Yes.
You've got Alexa and Siri and all those out there. Those become your agent of agents, so to speak. And you plug them into all these different ones. The example I've been using lately is you want to book a trip, and you say Alexa, book me a trip to Miami, and it goes out and figures out, okay, what's the cheapest flight, what's what hotels do you like a room on the top floor near the elevator, what car do you usually rent, that kind of thing. And then it goes out and talks to your bank and pays for it. I mean, that seems to be, for me, the place where all this happens. It makes the most sense right now.
It's an interesting point of view. I don't know that I have. I mean, I don't feel like I have any special insight there. Like I feel like that's as likely as anything. But I keep, again, like my mind keeps always kind of jump ahead. Like if I could actually do this successfully, I would just be making billions of dollars in the stock market. Like if I could figure out who the winners were going to be out of stuff, I wouldn't have to work. That would be my job. So I'm not real good at it, but I like the exercise. I like the exercise. It's like you like sports, right? I mean, I love watching baseball. I love to sit there thinking, oh, this is going to be the outcome because, like this new guy, The Miz, who's over there pitching to Milwaukee because he's young and he's struck out 12 guys in the last game and he's really good. And the team he's pitching against, they're like, haven't scored a run in their last 3 games. And then you go watch the game and the other team scores 12 runs and the guy gets chased in like the first third of an inning. It's like that same example in the business world. Like you try to predict, and the exercise is still worth the spend, right? Like the investment of like thinking about these things. So I don't know that we'll ever figure it out, but I feel like there's this angle of like, okay, you know, there's existing sort of players here. There's going to be brand new players. Like you could go and build
Hmm.
these type of platforms and be like, listen, I was talking to a customer the other day, and they're thinking about like agents all the way down strategy. They're going to use agents to build agents. The agents are going to interact with their data. The agents are going to be middleware. There's going to be customer facing products that sit on top that are also agents. Like it's agents all the
Yeah,
way
you're
down,
the
right?
one
Like this
person
is
unicorn.
literally an agent's inception. Yes, exactly. Well, in their case,
Yeah,
they're
but yeah,
they're a big company, but I like the one person unicorn. I definitely want to come back to because that's one of my favorite topics right now. But I think like they could build a platform and then get really good at doing that and be like, well, just bring your agents to us. Like we're awesome at this. We've got agents at every level. We know how to build the infrastructure. Like you said, it could be somebody who doesn't even exist today or isn't on anybody's radar that comes along and does this. Uh, it's but yeah, like let's switch gears because the one person unicorn I think has been on my mind a lot. Like ever since I
hmm
first heard this, I don't know. Like it feels like it's a North Star and it's unattainable, but it's worth talking about. But maybe it is
it's
attainable.
like,
I don't know. What do you think?
you remember MythBusters? I think this one would get definitely a
Yeah.
plausible uh, rating. It's
Okay. Yeah.
it's doable. I think there's a lot of pieces that have to line up to make something like that happen. Um,
Yeah.
and it, it's not going to happen tomorrow, but it will happen at some point. Um, I think
Yeah.
the thing that you know we'll probably see. So we're seeing with VC. The amount VC is going more and more towards Gen AI companies, but the VC
Yeah.
that's the amount that's going is actually less. So we're seeing instead of getting I don't know a 50 million round, you get 5, and you're expected to do the same
Mm.
amount with less because you have all these tools at your disposal now. So it is we'll see smaller teams until we get to the point where you have that one person unicorn.
I you know I don't know. I feel like the unicorn. It still seems unattainable to me, if only because like like one of my favorite things to talk about now is Rocks, like the revenue
Mhm.
operating system. Like we just had them on SaaS Mondays a couple weeks ago. Really liked their founder. I like this kind of theory that there's going to be these operating systems for different roles. Like your finance person is going to have an operating system. Your, chief intelligence officer is going to have a compliance operating. Like there's going to be these different operating systems, and then Omnistrate, which is like the control plane of your infrastructure, is like the actual control plane for the stuff you're building. And all of these like will allow somebody who's capable. Like I think about how Rocks works. Like you put in companies, and it goes and their agents go and they discover everything about those companies that you need. It goes and finds emails. It goes and finds their data, what rounds that they've where they're going to be. Like gets lots of stuff for you, and then you can set up campaigns, and then it will do the campaigns for like it automates all of these things. But you probably still need somebody in the beginning and end who knows
Yeah.
how to do that job, right? Like there's still like anyone who's met a great salesperson. I was talking to one in AWS once, and I was like, I swear I would like give him sand to sell back to me in the desert. Like you
Yeah.
just want to buy something from the guy, right? Like and he's not even trying. He's just so charming and like you're like, wow, you're amazing. Like that skill is not something most
No.
founders really have, right? And I still like to an extent, founder-led growth in that early stage is very important. But as you start to hockey stick up, you can't have dinner with every one of your customers, and you can't maintain that personal relationship like that sales guy who seems like he's been your best friend since second grade. As soon as you meet
Yeah.
him, does right. And then there's that finance person who, you know, is really awesome at understanding like everything looks great on paper right now, but you have to remember 2 years down the road this is going to happen because I've seen it at other companies. And they'll, AI can emulate that data, especially if it's got enough of experience and it's got enough things to draw off of. But like this is where, and I think there's some real truth to this, but maybe another concept that I was introduced to by a buddy of mine, Ryan Collingier, who's got a system called Platformer, which is really cool. Again, kind of like a control plane as a service type thing for automating your AWS infrastructure. He does a lot of before he became the CEO of Platformer, he did fractional CTO work. So like this concept that maybe you end out with like in building houses of sorts where 50 companies all share the same CTO, and he just goes between the different companies and like looks in and is like, okay, everything's on track. Over here, we should steer the ship a little bit. Salespeople like jumping around, they've got a whole suite of things to talk and sell, but their efforts are maximized. Like they're not wasting time going to these different companies and figuring out what their role needs to do. Everything's been laid out for them. Like, okay, next time you fly to New York, you need to meet with these 5 companies for these 5 products, and in this order so that we can close these deals. I mean, to me, that seems very plausible, and it might even just change the theory of what like a VC is, right? Like a VC, instead of being like, just throw money at them and give them a director board, actually has these.
You move
these
from
parts.
operator to orchestrator.
Yeah, I like that phrasing. I've been struggling with a good way to put that, but these things fit together like puppets, right? Like you now are like the puppeteer that's just sort of gently touching the strings and making sure that things move in the right direction in coordination. And it would, if nothing, I mean, it would let experienced founders scale very efficiently. I mean, one of the things I found working with startups is like serial founders are a very real thing. They do it once, and it's almost like if you have the right personality, it's like crack. If you love doing it, you get passionate about doing it, and then once that company reaches a certain point, you exit, you go start the next thing, right? And you have that sort of that addiction, that need to do those things. But if they could do 5 of them in parallel, they probably would. Like they would, those type of people have ideas all the time, and you'd just be unlocking them to just focus on that and not all of the other stuff that goes with it. Right?
It's almost like I think this industry requires a degree of ADHD to function. I mean,
so, Amazon certainly does. Jeez.
Yeah. It's, I mean, and I think it is one of those things that, the more that you have in flight, the more productive you feel sometimes. Not always the case, but when you shift from this, operator to orchestrator, then you really are able to, have all these work streams going because you're delegating in a sense. And that's where it becomes powerful. I mean, it's probably one of the hardest things for us to do as people is to, especially in our line of work, is to give up control and delegate. But this kind of forces your hand.
Yeah, I like that, man. It will definitely, it will let you load yourself up as much as you want to, right? It will let you either unlock doing everything or maybe just do nothing too.
So here's a thought exercise. Why would people be more likely to delegate to an agent versus a person?
Maybe trust.
So you trust an autonomous system more than you do a person?
I think you have to develop trust with people, and it takes some serious time to understand people's capabilities and dependability. Like I have to work with somebody for months, I think, before I really understand, like, this is a person, if I give them a task, it will be done in this way, in this amount of time. This is somebody that when I set a meeting will show up. I mean, we've all had coworkers who, you think you're doing something with them and, the day comes and they're not there. Just like physically don't show up or mentally don't show up. Either way is just as bad. And all of us who are doers find other doers, but it takes a minute. A non-doer can do a task and then you assume that they can do the next one and then they just don't show up.
I would argue that building that relationship and building that trust is more psychologically rewarding than delegating to an autonomous system.
You might be getting into
I think this is the human element of it, because we are animals that crave connection to each other, in some way, shape, or form. And
Fair.
when
Yeah.
you come at it from the perspective of, okay, I'm delegating to autonomous systems, there's a disconnect there. There is no connection. There's no emotional connection to it, and that is inherently what makes us human. So the value is more in being able to trust people than systems.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to put it. I think I have some questions. Like, I think, why do we always, what is it called when you give an inanimate object a personality?
It's
personification, or like
anthropomorphic. Yeah, I think so.
Anthropomorphism.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's right. I do that all the time. Like, my car has a name, and I talk to it when I'm driving. Like, we also have this tendency to do this. Like, do we just start to do it with AI, where we impose a personality upon it, start to treat it like it has a personality, and connect with it in that way?
So, where you end up is Jarvis.
Ooh.
And
good example.
I was just thinking about that. Yes, the personality and connection. You trust your dog more than you would trust an LLM, because you have that connection with your dog. You trust it to make sure that somebody who's at the door is supposed to be there. I mean, there is an inherent psychological connection, emotional connection. So maybe this is, I think, where we get into this whole thing about the humanistic elements of this being overlooked for the sake of efficiency.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a fair concern, and I think, God, I honestly, like, isn't our society all heading this way anyway, though? Like, I feel like with the introduction of the phone, the smartphone, and like, people have slowly slid away from each other a little bit anyway. Does this just enable us to, like, be in our own little personal caves and not rely on other people and get more and more isolated, or does this unlock us the ability to spend our time actually talking to people, because we can just trust the agents to go off and do the boring stuff?
I think there's some sort of balance there. There's not, it's not one or the other. There is, with everything, there's balance, and maybe it's being able to hold both of those at the same time.
Yeah, I wish I thought I was really good at that balance. I feel like I can definitely go hermit sometimes when I'm working on stuff. Just sort of just focus on the technology and focus on the job of what you're doing, as opposed to focusing on people. But it's more rewarding when, like, I would say, like, I've said this to you plenty of times, but I'll say this out loud here. Working for Amazon, Amazon culture is fine. The company's fine. I like working here. It's cool in a lot of ways. I could leave all of that as long as I could still talk to Amazon customers. Like, talking to customers and the ability to talk to the amount and the scale of customers we have here is my favorite part of working here. It has nothing to do with the internal culture. It has nothing to do with any of the other things that go along with working here. It's the fact that we get to talk to these awesome customers, hear what they're doing, connect with them. That's the most rewarding part of the job. And if your job was just connecting with machines all day, I think I would probably get into that mode, and it would just be a lot less rewarding. I'd be less happy for doing it.
So is it just these customer interactions you have, or is it, these customer interactions you have and then being able to come back and share them with the team?
I mean, that's fair, right? Like, I feel like that's the energy. Like, you get the energy from the customers, you share it with your teams. It creates thought leadership. It creates innovation. It creates excitement to me. Like, there is I guess, like, you could get into the psychology of why that is. Like, there's fear of talking to customers because it's your job, and if you do it wrong, like, there has to be some pressure. Like, you get in front of a group of executives and you say the wrong thing. Like, these are, smart people and a little judgmental. Oh, okay, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm not listening to you anymore. Like, you have to be on your game. You have to bring a presence. You have to project confidence. Like, you have to do, and you have to know what you're talking about.
Well, and there's a thin line between confidence and arrogance. And It is.
Yeah.
I've seen people step over it, easily, and I think the biggest challenge we have is we have to walk into a room with customers and build trust from the first second, and that
Yeah.
is difficult. The one of my favorite questions to ask in a workshop is, okay, you outlined all this stuff and all these technical challenges and whatnot. What's keeping you up at night? What is worrying you the most? And that unlocks an amazing amount of connection. And then it builds that trust, and they're more receptive to your ideas.
I like that. It does contextualize a little bit of that thought process of why it is so cool working with the customers here and being in a job that is customer facing. I do find like it's a little bit of a crack to it, right? Like you really want that reaffirmation. You really want those situations where you have to do that after a while. Like I was definitely, there's a whole imposter syndrome thing. When I showed up at AWS and I was coming from a startup and used to being in a room with just a bunch of people with similar ideas and coming into the role and being like, all right, here you are thrown in with some large AWS customer. You go, sound smart. It's like, I don't know if I'm going to sound smart. Like, I mean, I know what I'm talking about, but I don't know how to tell them that I know what I'm talking about, how to act when I don't know. Like, that's an interesting learning experience. I mean, I'd done consulting before, but here, because of what we have to do, you're expected to know answers to things you do not know the answers to because you work here.
I disagree with that. I think it's okay to say, what, I don't know, but I can find somebody. I can find somebody that does know. Yeah.
You have to know that. Yes. Which is a perfect answer. But when I showed up, I think
you felt like you had to have the answer.
To say you don't know. Felt like I had to
have
the
answer. So at what
answer,
point
right?
does that imposter syndrome flip and you have that realization, oh yeah, I do belong here?
I'll let you know. It's been 5.5 years. I feel like there are absolutely situations where I feel like I'm in control of the situation and I know what I'm talking about. I still have, this feeling. You meet lots of brilliant people in this company. I'm always like a little bit disappointed myself when I hear someone else, wow, that's amazing how much you know about that. I wish I knew too. Or how you present yourself, or like so many different levels where people excel at our customers and it's not just like at Amazon. Walk into a room and the CTO of a company just owns the room immediately, and everyone's just looking at him. You just, wow, what amazing gravitas. I wish I had that. I feel like I don't belong in the same room as you. Like I still feel that regularly, and I don't think that's bad. I feel like a little bit of that fear, if it's fear or need to self-improve, is good. Whether that positions you best or whether, I mean, I met people here who are also super cocky and just, project confidence rightly or wrongly. And that's all they do is they're always right. They always know everything. At least I'm not trying to be like that. That's not what I'm looking for.
And I had, a long time back, somebody that I worked for that, instilled, and it might seem superficial, but it actually does work. It's, make sure that you're put together and, that if you look good, you feel good, you project that self-confidence, and it kind of follows through. And so the best thing he ever did was took me to a tailor, and I got had suits made, and they got some jackets and stuff that I still wear today. And it's just like one of those when you're like, okay, I'm looking sharp, and you have that self-confidence, and that carries into the room. So it's it's one of those. It's the first step in kind of feeling like you're there and being able to command the room. It's like I said, it sounds a little superficial, but it does work.
I remember one of the things, Michael Beardsley used to be on our team. I remember he actually had a conversation earlier with us. He's like, a good pair of shoes goes a long way. in terms of like how you present yourself. Like just dress it up a little bit. Like you don't have to be wearing a suit in our job. Fortunately for us, like suit and ties
No.
aren't the day-to-day requirement. And even for customer meetings, lots of people show up in, a t-shirt and jeans, and you can get away with a lot, but the ability to look, like you said, to look put together, like you can pull that look off if you're sharp. Like that startup founder look, t-shirt, fancy jeans, good pair of shoes. You know who they are when they walk into the room, right? They have that presence. They're put together. The t-shirt is just saying that I can wear a t-shirt because I'm, or whatever.
One thing I can't get behind, and maybe this is just me showing my age, I can't really get behind sneakers with a suit. It just does not work for me.
Oh, I've never seen one that I liked. I've seen lots of people doing it. But yeah, like this could just be age. Like, get off my lawn, kid.
Exactly. But that was a tangent and a half.
So, I mean that's kind of the point of the show, right? To have these tangents. But yeah, like kind of looping back into the world of AI.
I want to see how you do this.
A question. So, well, no segue. I'm just jumping off the ship. We're going right into the water. I mean, what have you been? I've been playing with all sorts of tools lately. Playing with Klein, a lot of different stuff. Anything that's been interesting to you, and I'll give you some context too. Like going back to our story a while ago, we kind of started. We left the rails when we were talking about the single person unicorn, right? So we're going back onto those rails again. Single person unicorn. One of the things that another friend of ours, John Lawrence, often says is these tools unlock innovators to do what developers used to do. Like you could, as an innovator, you don't need the technical skill to do things. Like what tool are you using right now that you feel has unlocked the most of your potential that you would tell other people to start?
I think if you're just trying to make ideas tangible, starting with V0 from Vercel is a great starting point, because the way you can basically just talk it through what you're trying to create, and it just it iterates on it. It is the way, it's almost like build by stream of consciousness, and that I think is where you start innovating.
I like that. I mean, in general, because we're visual by nature, if you're trying to spin up an idea, if you can see the idea, like if you could visualize it, which again, Vercel creates great front ends, right? Like it's part of its thing is it's got lots of templates. It uses, modern JavaScript languages where you can do cool stuff. Like if you can create the idea of what it's going to look like, even if there's still lots of back end work to do, then that idea suddenly is real. Like you could show it to somebody else and be like, what if you could click through this website and it would do whatever you want to do, right? Like now you can see it and like, okay, now I can build some logic behind that. Again, as a startup founder, it's fake it till you make it, right? Like you get the idea working, you get an MVP, and then you bring it to show it to some people who have money to make an MVP turn into a commercial product. Maybe you get some seed funding, like you're saying. Maybe you get $1 million or $5 million. You develop this thing out and you try to sell it. Vercel's a great starting point. I've been working for the last few months with some of the people from NeonDB, and we've been working on creating a multi-tenant template for Vercel. And the idea, like we also have a friend working over at Vercel who's trying to help us with this. The idea is you can kind of build multi-tenant in Vercel anyway. You could do it now, but trying to bake in some more best practices. NeonDB in particular is pretty awesome because like it's packaged Postgres, lets you use row level security out of the gate. Self-managed identity provider like StackOff we can include in there, and you can get started for like a very low price bar in terms of building a reasonably acceptable application for selling to people, right? And so you start with V0, you build the POC, you get the thing working, then you start to build, like you take this other template and you'd be like, okay, now we can start to productionize this thing, like going through that progression, because we talk about SaaS all the time. SaaS concepts are really, for the most part, not what startup founders should be focused on in the early stage. Build an app. That's it. Focus on your app and your functionality. That's all I want you to focus on until you reach product.
Yeah, I mean, they are the fundamentals, the foundation that, all these apps are built on, identity, onboarding, metrics, metering and billing. I mean, all this, is stuff that we've been talking about for years within our team, but we're at a point now where it's table stakes. And
Yeah.
One of the interesting things I think, all these SaaS applications that are out there now, they've already got the foundations built to become an agentic experience. They're API driven. They've got security. They've got tenancy set up. It's all, the foundation is all there. It's really starts, if you have all the pieces in place, it becomes an evolution of the user experience.
Yeah, I mean that's a good way to think about it. And I also think, I mean, it's interesting because agents will be front ends, agents will be back ends, but I think still regardless, unless you are already working within an existing construct, like an existing application, and you're adding a feature to it, like the first thing you need to do is create some way for people to picture it. Like if it's just an API and you walk into be like, here, let me open up the terminal and flow some command line interface requests to my API. They're like, I that's awesome. I'm glad you have an API. That's cool, but like I can't picture what you're trying to do. Tell me here, right? I like that. I like V0 as a starting point. Is there anything else that's sort of on your radar that you're thinking about?
That's the first one I think of when it comes to the ideation of an application. I've been playing with Claude a bit, for just kind of pressure testing ideas, and seeing, okay, what, where is the, does this answer so what? And it really is pretty good at helping to determine that, and it's it helps you at least kind of validate your idea to a degree, not completely, but just those first steps, and then gives you you give yourself a choice whether or not you want to dig further or not.
Nice. Yeah, I think I like how you're thinking about it. I've been playing with tools too. I've told you before, like I picked up Klein. Spent about $20 taking a maybe 10-year-old application I'd written in Angular 1.5 and just using command, like didn't write a single line of code. Just kept telling it, like, do this, change this. Like it would run into some problems and I would just tell them to fix the problems. Like, oh, look what I did. Sorry about that. Let me go fix it now. Making lots of MCP calls, which is where most of the money was really racking up using like the public version of Klein. It was very cool. It was a very cool experience. And again, like it let me not have to, like I upgraded it to Next.js. I don't know Next.js. I honestly don't really want to learn Next.js. Nothing wrong with it. I'm not Next.js people. I'm not knocking Next.js. It's just another technology I would use as a throwaway. And once upon a time, if I was going to do a POC, I'd have to go spend a week on the docs and learn all of this framework and the best way to use it. And like what do the routers do? What is the framework? Like how is it sending traffic? And Angular 1.5 was very archaic, right? Like everything was in a single JavaScript file and like all sitting behind these widgets that you put into the application. I didn't want to have to figure out what the equivalence was of those and how to take the code I'd embedded into these widgets and move it around. Did all of that. So that's where I'm excited for people from that perspective. But that's more like the legacy thing, right? Like how do we get out of the legacy weight that we've built up? As you know, one of our teammates, Anthony's working on that problem that I'm kind of excited to see where he lands with that in terms of, tools that can take existing applications and move them into SaaS. I think that's an awesome horizon he's heading toward there. But I think that's, looking at the past and updating the past is great. I also like this idea of ideation, that thing Coyle was saying about how it's her thinking partner, like how you're talking about, like, what's the art of the possible here? What can I do? I think that's really the most exciting part of all of this stuff. And probably a pretty good place to wrap this up. Yeah.
No, I think, it's the ability to get from idea to something tangible is so much easier now than it used to be. I mean, you don't have to, build a React app, you just talk V0 through it and you've got, a tangible idea, and that is the value of these tools, is bringing ideas to life. And wasn't that a GE slogan?
Yeah, I know. And we'll end with a GE slogan. Don't sue us, please, GE. As long as we don't sing it, we're probably okay. Cool. All right, we're at the end of the hour. Anyone who happens to be watching, we don't have any opening or closing music or any smooth ending, so it's just going to be us saying goodbye.
Right,
so thanks for watching, everybody.